Closer to home, it's my pleasure to invite my co-chair for Cholangiocarcinoma UK, Professor Sheela Jayaraman, to give us an update on the activities of Cholangiocarcinoma UK. Thank you, Sheela.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start by thanking the organisers for inviting me to talk today about CCA-UK. I'm going to give you more of a review about the last meeting that we had for CCA-UK. But before I start, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about the purpose or the remit of CCA-UK. So the idea for CCA-UK is to bring together clinicians from different specialities, and we saw yesterday the number of specialities that actually do work together in hospitals to discuss cases, but we want to bring together the clinicians to sort of more broadly discuss CCA across the UK to understand variation in treatment, diagnosis and management for CCA-UK. And we also want to bring the clinicians together with fundamental researchers who work in the area of CCA-UK. Of CCA. I think the importance of that relationship shouldn't be underestimated. If we think about all of the amazing treatments that are now filtering through to the clinic, they're based on approximately 50 or more years of fundamental research in tumor biology, in biochemistry, molecular pathology. All kinds of different areas have had to come together so that we can get to these treatments. And it's important that scientists and clinicians do spend time understanding each other's areas and understanding the problems that each other faces. And now, collaboration is an easy thing to talk about. It's not as easy to achieve as you might think. And the way you achieve collaboration is to meet regularly, because by meeting regularly, you can build up trust. And ultimately, collaboration is dependent upon individuals being able to work together freely, to be able to exchange information, and to trust each other with each other's information. And this is what we really try to achieve in CCA-UK, bringing together individuals regularly so that we can work together more harmoniously. We also want to encourage a new generation of clinicians and scientists, because this is really important. And we want to be able to be a forum where we can air new ideas that aren't yet in the mainstream for the area. So we want to be able to bring in people who work on other cancers, for example, to understand their ideas and how they're treating people who have different diseases, so that we can learn from these other areas. We also act as a guiding committee for best practice and policy for CCA treatment. And of course, we liaise with the European network and other networks globally to try and learn from their positions. And then finally, of course, the CCA-UK liaises with the charity sector and, of course, in particular, the AMMF to improve education and to disseminate best practice for CCA-UK. Okay, so now I'd like to just give you an overview of the meeting that we had in earlier this year. There are a number of illustrious speakers who came and spoke to us and gave us some great presentations, and many of them are here today, so it's a little bit daunting for me to have to present to them some of their own work, but I'm going to give you my take on it, really. What I would say is that the meeting that we had in earlier this year was not just a series of presentations. A lot of it was about discussion. So we just sat and talked about the problems that we face in terms of treatment and management, and also in areas of basic research that we would like to promote. So I'm going to start with Professor Shahid Khan's talk. He talked to us about the National Epidemiology Project. And, of course, this was supported by the AMMF. And what was very striking was that the incidence for cholangiocarcinoma is rising. And this is in general agreement with the data that has been produced by the NHS, which shows that in 2020, the number of people with HCC was very, very similar with that of cholangiocarcinoma, which to me was actually quite surprising, even though I do have an interest in cholangiocarcinoma, I'm working in it, I hadn't realized that the numbers were quite so similar. So that was very striking. And the other thing that was particularly interesting was that more than a fifth of patients are relatively young. They're under the age of 65. And I hadn't appreciated that so much. And perhaps we might expect, but it's not a good thing, that there is a great variation in treatment with region and also with socioeconomic deprivation. So obviously there is a lot of work to be done in redressing that imbalance. What was particularly striking was that 50% of patients get no treatment at all. And that was a theme that Mr. Hassan Malik also presented. He showed us from current audits the CAP bill and also the National Consultant Information Programme, which is where consultant surgeons review information about their clinical activity and patient outcomes. Also that 50% of patients aren't getting any treatment. And he discussed with us, how do we get more information about this? How can we, what is the best way to get information about who is getting treatment and how they're getting treatment? And he spoke to us about getting information from referral centres and from surgical transplant centres, and whether patient case-based treatment or centre-based statistics were more useful. So that was a very useful and illuminating discussion. We had a great talk from Professor John Bridgewater, and he pointed out all the new recently approved treatments for cholangiocarcinoma that were approved in January of 2024. And he spoke to us in depth about the activity of oncologists and the importance of oncologists in allowing the genomic sequencing information to be accessed. The oncologist has to make sure that the samples are sent off for the specific patients, and they have to send the samples off to one of 7 regional hubs within the UK, and then they have to retrieve that information and disseminate it to the patient. And the importance of the oncologist in this process, I think, shouldn't be underestimated. I wasn't aware that not all oncologists are going to be completely aware of all the genetic, genomic changes that exist and the treatments that are existing for this, and that there is much to do to make sure that there is greater education in this area, and that more oncologists are able to spend the time to do this, because it is a very time-consuming process. Dr. Valerie Crowley gave us an update on systemic therapy, and she also pointed out that 2 new therapies had been approved in 2024. Durvalumab, which I don't really need to speak to you about today because we've all talked about the immunotherapy, and ivosidenib for IDH1 cholangiocarcinoma as well. But what was interesting to me was that there is a new trial, or an ongoing trial, the SAPPHIRE ABC10 trial, where durvalumab and gemcitabine and cisplatin are compared to targeted therapy as first-line treatment. And I think that's a very exciting trial that's ongoing, and that she told us about. Professor Chiara Bracconi told us about the Reg Bill study for cholangiocarcinoma, where she is spearheading a study where they're looking at a program of longitudinal liquid biopsy in biliary tract cancer patients. So she's looking for changes in circulating tumor DNA that might allow us to understand why some patients respond to chemotherapy and why some patients do not respond to chemotherapy very well. And this is currently ongoing, I believe. So that was very exciting. And then Dr. Pilar Acedo from UCL told us about early detection biomarkers for cholangiocarcinoma and primary sclerosing cholangitis, because patients with primary sclerosing cholangitis are at a relatively high risk of developing cholangiocarcinoma. It's between 7 to 15%. And as Simon Rushbrook has told us, this is a fibro-inflammatory disease, and Pilar is looking at immune markers in serum and also in tissue samples with the potential to detect cholangiocarcinoma earlier. So they're getting serum samples and they're looking for known and new analytes within the serum, and they're also having tissue samples and where they're carrying out spatial transcriptomics to look at changes in gene expression within different parts of the tumor. And they have got samples from the UK PSC Serum Library, and a lot of the work is in collaboration. They also have samples from the University of Salamanca in Spain and the RFH Biobank, and they're in the middle of analysing these 100 samples, and these samples are well annotated clinically. And this work is also in the middle, basically. And then Professor Shahid Khan also told us about the clinical trial that he spoke about yesterday, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we know that aspirin has a very important, can have a very important role to play. Actually, I went and looked up about aspirin in cancer, and I hadn't realized, but earlier this year there was a meta-analysis which has showed that across many tumor types there's a 20% reduction in mortality by taking aspirin, and I hadn't appreciated that either. So that's across many different tumor types, and there's an even greater reduction in incidence for people with Lynch syndrome. So with that background, I think this aspirin PSC trial is going to be a really exciting trial. And Professor Shahid Khan and Dr. Simon Rushbrook, who are heading this trial, and it's supported by the CCA-UK, are looking for patients for this trial. Okay, so that was an overview of the clinical CCA-UK meeting, but we have meetings that rotate between basic science and fundamental science and more clinically based meetings. And we had early this year, the more clinical based meeting, but we are about to organize, or we have organized the next cholangiocarcinoma UK meeting, which was going to be slightly more fundamental science focused. And that's going to occur at Nottingham University at the Jubilee Conference Centre. The exact date is to be confirmed, but at present it's on track for being the 16th and 17th of December 2024. And it will focus also on translational research within cholangiocarcinoma, but also we want to invite speakers from areas who are a little bit tangential to cholangiocarcinoma research to fuel new ideas within this area. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much.